Hello everybody, welcome to the fifth last day of the dragon's 42-month lease over mankind. With the death of Queen Elizabeth II and the beginning of the reign of King Charles III, today is Elul the 10th, 2022 in the biblical Hebrew calendar, and the dragon's lease in Revelation 13, it expires on Elul the 14th. Lasts 42 months from 2018 Adar 20. And the reason that's so important is it's the absolute end of Satan's divinely granted authority to be Caesar to mankind, by which I mean secular king to mankind. He had a 6,000-year lease that was granted to him 4 years after Adam sinned. It was granted to him in Nisan 3989 BC. Adam sinned Nisan 14, 3993 BC. 33 and a half years after he was born in 4027 Tishri 2 BC. The length of Jesus' ministry before he paid for that sin by the corresponding ransom of Paul. 4 years after Adam sinned, 48 months after Adam sinned in Nisan 3993, 14th, on the first fruits, which was I think Nisan 17, 3989 BC, the calendar was different then. Before the flood, the calendar indeed had 360 days in it, 12 months of 30 days each, which is the biblical lunar calendar and was the original calendar of all mankind. Because the Egyptians used it, the Babylonians used it, until about 800 BC. So 48 months until he was appointed as Caesar and 50 months until he was installed as Caesar, because at the first monthly jubilee, 50 months after Adam's sin, in the month of Sivan 3989 BC, Adam was appointed priest to mankind. And the reason he was appointed priest is that Jesus was no longer king. Satan was the king, so you needed to have a priest. When Jesus was the king, you didn't need anything because he was both the secular and the sacred king. Mankind was originally, the original Caesar of mankind was God. And then when Adam sinned, he was bought from death. He was sentenced to death, he died. He was brought out of death by Jesus, who then became his owner and his king. Not his owner so much as leaseholder for 6,000 years was the deal done with God, because he was God's son. Sons are owned by fathers, biblically. So Adam is still God's son, but he's now God's grandson through Jesus, I suppose. But Jesus had a 6,000-year lease on Adam, which expired 2008, Nisan 14. Satan's lease began, as I say, he was appointed as Caesar, Nisan 17, 3989, 48 months after Adam's sin, and he became Caesar. He was installed as Caesar 50 months after Adam's sin, coincident with Adam becoming a priest, because he was denied access to the tree of life for 50 months. If you read the sentence count of the scripture, saying that in order that he can't put his hand out and actually take and eat whatever from the fruit of the tree of life, he's put out of the garden, and the cherubs with the swords were put to guard it. So Adam became our priest 50 months after he sinned, and that was coincident with Satan being installed as our Caesar. And then 6,000 years after the appointment as Caesar takes you to 2012 Nisan 14, and 6,000 years after the installation as Caesar takes you to 2012 Sivan, and on Sivan 14 we ceased to be Adamic and we became non-Adamic, all those in a true church, by the temple ratio prophecy, and because Adam can only work as a sacred king for God, and Adam and his sons, for 6,000 years, 6 working days, 1,000 years for a day. Then he has to have a 1,000-year Sabbath. So every true church, and there were only 2 of them at the time, the Lord's Witnesses and a sect of the Watchtower called Laodicea in Revelation chapter 3, they became non-Adamic, but both of us did, 2012, and we've been non-Adamic 10 years, as have they. And then Satan got 2,000 day payback for the 2,000 days that he was evicted from heaven, during Jesus' ministry when he was down here, and Jesus spent half his ministry evicting demons. And that takes you to 2017, Heshvan 6. And then there was the 8-day war of Revelation 12, taking into Heshvan 14, 2017, when the dragon, Satan and his demons, his angels, were passed over in heaven. Then there's 6 days of there was no room found for him in heaven, and down he was thrown to the earth. The sentence count of that is 6 times. That takes you to Heshvan 20, 6 days. And then it took him 30 days down the steps of Jacob's ladder, a day for a cubit in height of the ark. Jacob's ladder is in the ark, it's 30 cubits high. It's a day for a cubit. It took him 30 days to come down Jacob's ladder from an angel to a human. And he started possessing humans, 2017, Chislev 20. And he possesses us for 2,000 days of Mark 5, the 2,000 pigs that the 6,000 demons wanted to go into. It's prophetic. It tells you how long demon possessions last as a group. It's 2,000 days. That takes you to Tammuz 10 next year, 2023, which is the end of demon possession, but not the end of the world quite. I mean, the end of the world is in 5 days' time in terms of the judicial end of the world. That does not end Satan's. It ends Satan's divine authority, but not his physical authority, because Satan doesn't care that much about divine authority. I mean, he'll take it if it's on offer, but when it expires, he doesn't go peacefully and say, it's a fair cop, my lease has ended, I've had a good crack, I'm now going to go. He doesn't. He says, well, I don't care, I want power, and I want power, and what I want is power. So he's going to continue to be in power until God physically removes him. And that is we're then in the Pharaoh of Egypt story, when God can legitimately say to Pharaoh, which is Caesar, which is Satan, let my people go. And Pharaoh, who is Satan, who is Caesar, will say, and then 10 plagues appear. Alright, so, however, there's a 42-month lease of Revelation 13, which is the last piece of authority Satan gets, and the reason he gets a 42-month lease over mankind is that he gave Michael a 42-month ministry over mankind when Michael was down here, Jesus, giving his ministry from 29 Tishri 10, and then 40 days in the wilderness to Heshvan 20, and then the miracle started, I think, Heshvan 29, the veil lifting day for the marriage of Cana, the marital supper day, when the bridegroom was there having the supper and tasting the water that was turned into wine, his first miracle. And it was actually 1254 days if you exclude 3 days for his death and 10 days from his ascension, from the end of his ascension, the end of the 40 days of his appearing in Acts 1. If you exclude the 10 days from ER 25 when he finished his ascension when he finished his appearances, he didn't finish his ascension actually, he finished his appearances. If you exclude that to Sivan 5, the Pentecost, when he poured out the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, the last miracle of his ministry, then it's 1266 days net gross, and it's 1254 days net, excluding 3 days in death and 10 days when he didn't make any appearances. So that has to be paid back to, and that's paid back between 2018 Adar 20 and 42 months later is 2022 Elul 14. And the reason we know, well, there's lots of reasons we know why Satan's lease must end on Elul 14. One of the simple ones is that, well, it's not so simple, but we became non-Adamic, Isaic, in 2015 Tammuz 14. And then you count the 1290 days of Daniel 12 twice, because there are 1290 days, from the time the constant feature has been removed and the transgression causing desolation put in place, there will be 1290 days. But that's two things, right? So if you interpret that distributively, it's from the time the constant feature is removed, there's 1290 days, and from the placing of disgusting thing causing desolation, there's 1290 days. So that's a total of 2 times 1290 days, or 2580 days, or 7 years and 2 months. And that takes you from Tammuz 2015 to the 14th to Elul the 14th, 2022. So that's one way to see it. Probably the simplest way is that the discontinuous Gentile times, which is a malediction, a kingship malediction of 2,520 years of Daniel 4, has two gaps in it. One discovered by Dr. Stephen E. Jones of what used to be the Worldwide Church of God, but now the not quite so Worldwide Church of God, or whatever he's in now. But he got it right. There's a Maccabean gap. He didn't quite get the beginning or the end of it right. It lasts 98 years. And then I discovered a further gap in Babylon when the head of Jehoiakim was lifted up above all the other kings in Babylon who were in exile. And the throne of Jehoiakim was lifted up. So if his throne is lifted up, he's restored as a king even though he's in exile. And that lasted 10 years. So you've got a total of 108 years to add to the conventional Gentile times, which Russell correctly calculated ended in 1914 Tishri, although he got the wrong date. He thought it ended Tishri 10, not a bad guess, but Gentile times always end on the first day of Booths, so it was Tishri 15. It began 607 Tishri 15, not with the assassination of Gedaliah, which was years later in 586 or something BC, but with the defeat of King Josiah to Nietzsche. And Nietzsche made him pay taxes to Pharaoh, and at that point Caesar was Pharaoh, not God, and so the Gentile times had begun. So if you count 2,520 plus a 98-year Maccabean gap, plus a 10-year Jehoiachin gap in Babylon, you end up at 2022 Tishri 15. And then the first Zoa Pentecost after that is Heshvan 5. And the first fruits for that Pentecost is Elul 16, and that is the appointment of Jesus over the kingdom, over Abraham, actually, over non-Adamic Abraham, 2 days after Elul 14, which is the end of Satan's lease. So you can deduce it from the Gentile times, you can deduce it from Daniel 12, verse 12. There are many other ways to deduce it, but anyway, the incredibly important and exciting and unprecedented thing in this world is that in 5 days' time on Elul the 14th, so from sunset Monday to sunset Tuesday, that is the last day of Satan's divine authority. So by sunset Tuesday, Satan has no divine authority, and that'll be a fantastic thing for mankind, although it won't appear fantastic physically because he is going to throw a wobbler. I'm not sure he knows his lease is expired until it does. I'm not sure that the terms of that lease were, if you want to work out when the lease ends, read the Bible. And he's not prepared to do that, or if he does, he can't understand it, or it's hidden from him. Because the scripture says he was thrown down to the earth knowing he had a little period of time, but it doesn't say how little a period of time he had. It doesn't say he knew exactly how little his period of time was. It just says he was thrown down to the earth knowing he had a short period of time in Revelation 12. So here we stand, 5 days left of Satan's lease. And Jesus is appointed Caesar over non-Adamic Abraham on Elul 16, and over Adam, which is most of mankind, on Elul 19, and over Isaac on Tishri 16, and over Cain, the seed of the serpent, on Tishri 17, one in C first fruits. And then he's installed over Abraham on Heshvan 5. He's installed over Adam on Heshvan 8, over Isaac on Chislev 5, and over Cain on Chislev 6. And from those dates, he is Caesar. And only when he's installed as Caesar is he in a position to say to Pharaoh, right, I'm the king now, you aren't. Let my people go. And Pharaoh, who shouldn't even be around, he should have cleared off and, gone back to wherever he came from. He's still allowed to be here, actually, but he should cease being Pharaoh. But he won't do that. He'll carry on trying to cling on to power like every politician does. And that's when you get the 10 plagues of Egypt, which are 10 months, which take you from Heshvan 5 to the absolute end of Adam on Tishri 14, 2023. That is the physical end of the world. And the time between the end of Satan's lease and the end of the world is a time of the end. I mean, a time at the end, you really want to be one time long. And so from Elul 14, 2022, the end of Satan's lease, the dragon's lease, actually not Satan's lease, it's the dragon's lease. It's most important, that distinction. Satan did not get the dragon's 42-month lease. It went to the dragon, which meant that the demons can all fight over which one gets what. And of course they will fight. And that makes them not particularly effective, because as Jesus said, a divided house will fall, and they are a divided house, seeking not unity, but power. So a year later is 2023 Elul 14, and that's actually the 12th crop of Revelation 22, the tree of life of Revelation 22, which is the tree of life of the Garden of Eden. It's the non-Adamic restoration. People from Elul 14 will enter into non-Adamic restoration. All the people on the earth who are going to be saved will cease to be Adamic, which is the most incredible thing. It is the fulfillment of Hosea's word when he said, "Death, where is your..." I mean, Paul quoted Hosea saying, "Death, where is your victory, where is your sting?" Hosea said the original thing, which was something similar, and then he said, "It's kept covered from your eyes." So we don't see people becoming non-Adamic, and we don't see them conquering sin, but here's how it works. And I make no apology for however far you are away from this understanding. It is down to the negligence of your church in doing research. When you die, your spirit, everybody is software, your spirit is software. It's a DI rather than an AI. It's a load of self-writing code, and it's inside this human body. And when you die, the body packs up and the spirit is transferred into your associated angel. You have an angel because when you dream at night, the movie studio for that dream is your angel. We did cover that in another video. The cinema is your human brain. Your human brain is powerful enough to act as the IMAX cinema for your dreams. It is not powerful enough to act as the movie studio for your dreams, because your dream is an animated movie. It's not. It creates its entire virtual reality itself, and you interact with that virtual reality and it seems totally real to you. And in order to have that sort of computing power, you're not going to get it from a human brain, which has a maximum cycle time of 80 hertz. That's the gamma waves. The maximum speed of a gamma wave is 80 hertz, 80 cycles per second, and you have 100 billion neurons. Whereas a computer can do 2, 3, 4 billion operators per second. They go at 2, 3, 4 gigahertz. And you know, a good CPU has 10 billion transistors. But it takes Pixar, they've got 24,000 servers going at 3 gigahertz. It takes them 3 years to render an animated movie. I can't remember how many hours. I think it's 1 billion hours. I can't remember how many hours. Was it 1 million hours? I can't remember. But it's a monstrous amount of computing power, way more than the brain has. And the brain does it in real time. And not only that, but there's 100 people working on the movie too. So to prove that you have an angelic brain, a dream is created by your subconscious brain in real time, in circumstances where 100 conscious human brains cannot create a 90-minute movie in less than 3 years, aided by 24,000 3 gigahertz computers. So you need a way more powerful brain than the human brain to do that. And you know, we all know that movies are shot in movie studios and they're screened in cinemas. There is no movie studio in the cinema. The cinema is not where you make the movie, it's where you screen the movie. So you are the cinema. You cannot therefore also be the movie studio. The movie studio is your angelic brain. Every time you sleep and you dream, your spirit is dreaming on the angelic brain, and it's being streamed via a wireless link to your human brain, and that's how it is. And God can communicate with your angelic brain, but not with your human brain. Not in this system anyway. So what happens when you die? You go to sleep, and your spirit sleeps, and you dream in your angel. Now if you are Adamic, you then go into Hades, which is Adamic death. Hades is where your spirit comes out of your associated angel and goes into a shared angelic server. At that point you're dead. Somebody who's dead is somebody who doesn't have their own soul. If you're in a shared soul, you're dead because you don't have your own soul. In fact, you're still dreaming and you're still subconsciously alive, but you're dead in the sense that you're not conscious in your own soul. So that's the first death. Now, but when you're non-Adamic, you cannot enter into the first death. You're ransomed out of it. Jesus has paid for that, just as he paid for Adam's, to remove him from first death. And so you do not go into a sleeping angel. You go into a sleeping angel, but you do not go into a shared angelic server. You remain in your own associated angel, and you can only remain in that for 5 or 10 times, because Jesus said when he died, Father, into your hands I entrust my spirit, which is 10 fingers. And we know that he was resurrected within 3 days, and therefore it can't be 10 days, and therefore it must be 10 hours. And in the Psalms it says, into your hand, David said, or Solomon or someone, I think it was David, into your hand I entrust my spirit, which means that it's 5 hours in another case. And again, that can't be 5 days, because Jesus was resurrected on the 3rd day. So you're dead. You're dead, but you're not fully dead. If you are an Adamic, you fully die, and you end up in a shared angelic server, not in your human soul and not in your associated angelic soul. If you're born again and have an angelic soul which you own rather than you rent or borrow, then you don't go into Hades, you go into your angel and you get resurrected angelically. Actually, you don't. You get resurrected as a human into the ark, and then later you go up Jacob's ladder to become an angel. But nonetheless, if you've got an angelic soul, if you're born again, being born again is taking ownership of the angel that we are all connected to. You think because you're sitting down here as a human, you don't have a modem linked to an angel. You're wrong. When you look at a computer, it's linked via a network to a whole bunch of other computers and the internet. It's exactly the same with humans. The ironic thing, as I said in the video, which I find astonishing, is that mankind is busy trying to get us networked into some kind of computer so that we can store our spirit in that computer. Well, God's already done that. You are networked to an angel, your own angel. Well, you're an angel you lease. And if you're born again, you own it. And what that means is when you die, you don't go into the first death. But if you're non-Adamic, the same is true. If you're non-Adamic, you cannot die at an Adamic death. So instead what happens is your spirit goes to sleep, you dream in your own angel for 5 or for 10 hours, and then you are resurrected as a human in the ark. The ark is a spaceship which does not exist in 3D space-time. It's outside of it because it's not visible to mankind. You know, you can't detect it on a radar or anything, because if it was detectable, then Satan would shoot it out of the sky. So that's what happens with a non-Adamic church and with death. The first Lord's witness who died today, I think, or yesterday, in Africa, in Tanzania. And you cannot die of old age or of sickness if you're non-Adamic, because you aren't under that penalty. You can be run over by a bus. This woman was in a car crash, but she will have been asleep in her own angel for 5 to 10 hours, and then she'd have been resurrected. So she will now be in the ark, and one day she will be very, very famous, because she is the first Lord's witness to be so resurrected. She won't be the first non-Adamic person to be so resurrected. Some Laodiceans in the other non-Adamic church would have beaten her to it, because there's a hell of a lot more of them than there are of us, and I'd imagine 1 or 2 of them have been involved in car crashes, but none of them would have died of old age. Well, and a lot of them were First New Covenant and HLC, Heavenly Lord Covenant saints, and therefore would have died sacrificially and been resurrected, but it's a different matter. So that's the exciting thing about becoming non-Adamic. And so here I will announce the acceptable year of Isaiah 61. It's actually the accepting year of Isaiah 61. It's a year from Elul 14, 2022, which is in 5 days' time, to Elul 14, 2023, during which time, at every 14th of the month, people who have faith, or people actually who have no faith but have love, and are therefore sons of the first Abrahamic covenant, the 1AC, by means of that faith or that love, will receive a non-Adamic transformation. The ones who have faith get it in the first 6 months, from Elul to Adar, 14, and they get a standing resurrection. They don't realise they died. You fall asleep, your genes are zapped, and you wake up in the morning as somebody else in a different body, but you don't think you're in a different body, you can't detect it. Whereas the 6 months from Nisan 14 to Elul 14 inclusively, that's the OMC or the LRC, which is, FRC is Faith Ransom Covenant. OMC is the Omega Covenant, or the Love Ransom Covenant. We call it the Omega Covenant because Jesus said, I am the Alpha and the Omega. And he is the first and the last of 24 covenants, because there were 24 letters in the Greek alphabet and still are. And that's the Love Ransom Covenant, which nobody knows about. It's a sealing covenant. So you can be saved if you have faith, which means you obey the first law of God, to love God with your whole heart, soul, mind and strength. Or you can be saved if you have love, which means that you obey the second law of God, which is to love your brother as yourself. Either is sufficient for salvation. You do not need them both. You only need one or other. But if you have neither of them, you will go to hell. But in the next 12 months, everybody who's going to be saved into the kingdom, nearly everybody, because God is always one step more merciful than humans can imagine. He doesn't go the extra mile, he goes the extra mile after the extra mile, does God, in his love, in his infinite love. And I mean infinite. His justice is finite, his love is infinite. That is why he will save every single spirit, conscious spirit he ever created, every human and every angel. He will save them all, because he won't give up until he has. Because that is the depth and extent of his love. And he is God, which means everything that is his delight he shall do. And it is his delight to save his children, however badly they behave. But he will make them pay for their sin prior to their redemption. But he will give up on none of them, not one. Nobody does he give up on. So the acceptable year is that. Now there's another definition of the acceptable year, which is it runs from Tishri 14 to Tishri 14 rather than Elul 14 to Elul 14. Because on Tishri 14 it is actually the Elul 14 is the early Laodicean FRC Passover. Tishri 14 is the actual Laodicean FRC Passover. And on Tishri 14 to 2023 is what we call the Last Chance Saloon Passover, or the First Death Passover. So every Zoa, this church, ends 2023 Elul 14, and we hand this church over to the Third Holy Spirit, Jesus' wife, on Adar 5, before the final FRC Passover. And once Jesus is running this church, you might think you have to join this church to be saved. You don't. It's a good idea to join it, very good idea. You will be saved if you do. But if you don't, the acceptable year for Zoa ends on 2023 Elul 14 at the 12th crop of Revelation 22. But there's one last chance which we call the Last Chance Saloon. And that is the last week of Daniel 9 verse 27, when he will keep the covenant in force for the week, for the many. And that runs from Tishri 3-4, 2023 to Tishri 10 is the entrance, Atonement Day. And then if you go into the Last Chance Saloon, which isn't this church, it's actually the descended church of the 1AC, which is the descended church essentially of Melchizedek and of Jesus. Because all through history, mankind has failed to run a perfect church, which is hardly surprising. We're a long way from perfection. We've attempted to run various churches, true churches and false. True in the sense that God is officially behind it, false in the sense that God is not officially behind it, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily a terrible thing. You know, I mean, all religions try and do some good stuff, and they have good points and bad points. At this time, they're worse than they've ever been. And God advises people to get out of the false churches, which is all churches except for the non-Adamic churches. And right now there's only one non-Adamic church, and of course I believe it's this church, but if I'm wrong it will be another church. But it will soon be lifted up, as Isaiah 2 says, above all the other mountains which are church administrations and even secular administrations. And another meaning of that is into the ark, actually. It will be run from the ark, where these people are resurrected to. But there's your last year, either from Elul to Elul or Tishri to Tishri. I mean, really it's 13 months, which is the time and the season of Daniel 8. I'll extend their life for a time and a season, he says, which is a time and an appointed time, actually, which is a year and a month. And that runs from Elul 14 to Tishri 14, Elul 14 this year in 5 days' time, to Tishri 14 next year in 13 months and 5 days' time, which is the absolute end of entrance into death, the end of Adam, the physical end of the world. It's the first death Passover. The last people to die Adamic death die it in 13 years and 5 days' time, if our chronology is now correct. So that's the acceptable year, accepting year. Thanks.